we will meditate on what we learn as an example. So where does this come from? Remember the onion structure of the class that I will not go into too much detail. I'll skip a lot of details, not to scare you, but probably in the next round we'll go much deeper. We are taking you slowly into complexities so that you are comfortable. So magnification is not the resolution. So you can keep on magnify, so but it will be empty magnification. You can do this experiment using your mobile camera. You can keep on. You can take a picture from your mobile camera and you keep on zooming over that, and you will see. Will you see atoms? No, because that does not have resolution. Even if you keep on magnifying a mobile picture, at some point you will see pixels, right? Pixel density depends upon the chip, the sensor which your mobile camera is having, depending upon how many sensors are crammed in per square inch. So that is basically many camera companies fool the customers. For example, many Apple uh, mobile still they produce best images, and the megapixel is I think 12 megapixel, while you can see all kinds of Chinese companies, MI or all kinds of things, they will tell you 128 or 64 megapixel. So there are a lot of tricks there, but it depends upon your pixel sensor quality also. What is the ISO, and how much light photons it can process, and so basically pixel 1 megapixel, 2 megapixel, 10 megapixel. Like 1 megapixel is roughly 1,000 pixels in a matrix in XY direction. So that forms, we'll discuss about that later on, what is the meaning of this megapixel, how it is relevant in TEM. Uh, but you will start seeing pixels. So that is the magnification, right? Capital D divided by a small d. So basically, you look at the feature size in the image plane, and D is in the object plane where the object is held actually. Okay. Uh, Now let us come to the resolution of a microscope. And this definition is not limited to electron microscope. It is also valid for optical microscope. It is not valid for atomic force microscope or scanning tunneling microscope. There we use different definition. So it is limited by aberration and diffraction. So we'll discuss today diffraction limited resolution, which we discussed last time also. Remember lambda by 2 Abbe criterion. These two things are completely unrelated. Aberration, I gave you the example of Hubble telescope, uh, which had a large, probably 6-7 meter glass lens, which was like, how do you make such a large glass, which has to be, when you make telescope, you need lenses, right? Huge lenses actually, and you melt the glass, and then you pour it in the mold, and it's not that easy as you are always worried about uh, bubbles and all kinds of things, and so this spherical aberration came to a focus of the people um, when this Hubble telescope was launched, and later on scientists discovered that it has spherical aberration when they started analyzing the images. So and also it is not very easy to fix those. Some of the problems cannot be fixed. So you can see on internet Hubble telescope story, and it is very interesting, and that will also tell you how important uh, aberrations can be. So there are two kinds of aberrations, spherical and chromatic aberration. So we'll focus on the diffraction limited resolution. So 2 points are regarded as resolved when the principal diffraction maximum of one image Just let me show you. So one of the principal maximum of one dot, okay, coincide over the minimum of another dot. Okay, you can see the first minimum of this one somewhere here. So if these points move closer than this, okay, then you cannot say that these 2 points are resolved. That is the most, I mean, people give all kinds of definitions about resolution. Okay, so this is the best definition, and please use this definition right now. I mean, if I ask you after 1 year, what do you mean by diffraction limited resolution, you should be able to answer this. This is the proper definition actually. Okay, this is the most scientific definition actually. Okay, so you cannot consider, you will definitely consider this these 2 points as resolved. These are also just resolved because, I mean, I'm sorry, this is slightly far, but this is exactly here you have this point which is overlapping here. But if you move these spots closer than that further, you cannot call this point as resolved. So this is not resolved. This is just resolved. This is nicely resolved. This is the definition of diffraction limited resolution. So of course we can discuss about mathematics, but this is the physics-based definition. Okay, you can always say from lambda by 2 and all kinds of things, but if somebody asks you where does it come from, so those equations actually come from this. And so from where this, so basically each dot makes this kind of a airy disk actually. So it might, this is again 11th 12th standard knowledge, that there is a, this is the diffraction pattern, right? So this is the center maximum, and then these are secondary maximas, and this is a minimum here, and this is another minimum, and you can see that. So so each point in the object will, when the electrons they interact with your sample, so each scattering object, each scatterer, which is okay, will when the electron pass through, when electron undergoes this event of diffraction, so they will form this kind of pattern. This is called airy pattern actually. If you look at from the top, it is basically like a disk actually. So you will have I'll show you airy disk if there is an image. Now, so airy disk is basically, if you look at from the, this is from the side, this is from the side actually. If you look at the airy disk, actually this is center in the at the center it's a bright, and then this is dark, and then bright. If you defocus, on Deepavali, there are these lights, and you are taking a picture, and then if you slightly defocus the lens, then you start seeing those kind of defocus rings actually. So it's pretty much the same actually. Okay. Yeah. So as I was telling that human eye resolution is roughly around the same which I was mentioning. Okay. So light microscope we have already discussed. TEM resolution has become better than this. I think some student told me that it has gone to, I think, 0.35 angstrom. I think it is better than that. So though, as Manisha pointed out, that theoretical, so it is basically 0.35 times 10 to the power minus 10 meter, and diffraction limited resolution theoretically is theoretical resolution is much less, right? Diffraction limited, which is 2.7 times 10 to the power minus 12. This is much better, right? But this is achievable actually in practical. This is this is allowed, this is possible, but this is in best of the microscope can achieve this. So what is the problem? Problem lies with not with the diffraction limited resolution, right? uh, the problem lies not with this, problem lies with this, and aberration actually. So aberration, even this is actually for microscope which are corrected for aberration. Now in India there are many such microscopes. The first one was installed at TIFR, FEI Titan, and then at IIT Madras, and JNCSR I believe they have, and TIFR Hyderabad I believe they have. I think Defense DRDO also has one. Uh, okay, so DA Department of Atomic Energy got it installed at TIFR Mumbai, um, and DRDO got it separately. I'm not sure where the DRDO one is. I think probably in the Mumbai campus. I'm not sure, but IIT Madras definitely has got one. Okay, so even for aberration corrected microscope, you have a problem. So what is the reason that you do not get? Because there are other practical issues, like aberration is not only with the from the microscope; it also comes from your sample. So your sample uh, is a source of a significant source of chromatic aberration, believe me. And this is actually good and bad both, because chromatic aberration happens because electrons are losing energy, because electrons are undergoing inelastic scattering. I mean, and that loss of energy when electrons interact uh, through your sample is very important to give some analytical chemistry information. I mean, because chemists would like to know not just about that atom, but also about the neighborhood. For example, you would like to know about uh, Manisha's friends also, not just about Manisha. Suppose Manisha, assuming that Manisha is a gold atom. Okay, so that's what chemistry students are quite ambitious. They want to know the bonding and oxygen state and all kinds of things. So those things are not possible by many other techniques. Actually, for example, um, uh, energy dispersive X-ray scattering. So electron energy loss processes can tell you that information, but uh, that energy loss of electron forms a problem for the electron images which you saw in the movie today. It forms another background. Actually, we'll discuss it later on. So now, in literature, there are two confusing equations. Confusion exists because they were given by two different people. One by Lord Rayleigh. I think you know about Lord Rayleigh criterion and Rayleigh scattering, right? Ernest Abbe, the name was introduced to you in my previous lecture. So you can see the difference is very small. Here you have, so R is the resolvable distance between two pixels, fine. Lambda is the wavelength of the radiation. In this case, it is the electron wavelength. But if you are working with the optical microscope, so that becomes the wavelength which you are using inside the source of optical microscope. Na is numerical aperture, which is n sine theta, because uh, these equations were given for optical microscope, so the n basically still stands out. So you can see here Rayleigh reached to this uh, 0.61, and not many times you will see it twice the number. I mean, for example, you will see it 1.2 because it's a diameter basically. So okay, so no, don't worry about that. So in an optical microscope, if you want to decrease this number, so idea is that you would like to decrease this number R. So there are many ways of doing that. You can increase, you can decrease, sorry, you can, let me erase this. So either you can decrease this, decrease the wavelength, that is the quickest way of achieving lower and lower R, or you can increase the angle, collection angle, or you increase the refractive index. So if you notice the old-fashioned optical microscope, they used to play with these tricks quite a lot. For example, they started using UV microscope, and but you have already the problem there. Or you will use oil immersion lenses. Okay, have you heard about oil immersion lenses? So you replace the medium with oil. So what you're doing, you are increasing the refractive index slightly. So you get clarity, slightly better clarity. Or you increase the aperture size. Theta is basically aperture size. Okay, you can suppose your lens is like this or like this, right? So when you increase the aperture size, so your collection angle is, I'll show you. So so this is your theta. So this is your aperture, and so if you take a larger lens, so your theta becomes larger. But you cannot keep on increasing theta. Can you do that? No, you cannot do that. Right? There is always a limit. Right? That that's why nowadays in your mobile you see four different lenses, uh, four different cameras, because you would like to see take your selfie. So then you need a different focal plane, and then you want to see the building, NCL main building as a background. That also should be clear. So then you need another focal distance, and you can see it in the normal instruments also, that you get here. You can see that you are increasing the um, aperture, right? And you can see that here aperture is larger, so your focusing spot becomes smaller and smaller because you are focusing it smaller. Okay, this is bigger, this is bigger, right? Because that's how the cross section happens. So, so basically, if you want to take crisper images, suppose you want to look at only your face, not the background. So you take lenses with larger aperture. Some of you, if you are professional photographer, you know what I mean. And those lenses are quite expensive and heavy. So you basically know it by number F, right? F, for example, F uh, 1.7 will be very expensive than F, for example, 2.5. F 7 or F5 will be able to give you, for example, if you want to take a picture of an entire garden, then you take, okay, so you get larger field of depth. We'll discuss in detail later on. This is pretty much part of the course, and you'll become an expert in photography also using my course, because electron microscopy teaches you so many things. So, so Lord Rayleigh was a British physicist, and he also got Nobel Prize. Right, he was a co-discoverer of element argon, and it is always you know important to know what they did. Actually, the scientist equations we are using. So you know that Rayleigh scattering explains the blue sky, and we get Rayleigh peak in the Raman, and it's elastic scattering. And okay, so Rayleigh scattering basically falls 1 over lambda to the power 4, It's proportional to 1 over lambda power 4. That's the reason that behind the blue color of the sky. Okay, and it uh, is directly proportional to d to the power 6, d being the diameter of the scatterer. Okay, so this equation is helpful if you are doing dynamic light scattering. Some of the students who might be using their PhD dynamic light scattering. So there you have to be very careful, because if because scattering cross section, if you take 10 nanometer particle in your solution, and suppose you have 1,000 particle which are 10 nanometer, and you have few 1 or 2 particle which are of 100 nanometer. Now scattering from only very few 100 nanometer particle will be many times less, many times more. I mean, a million times more than 10 nanometer. You can put this 10 nanometer here, right? This would be 1 million, and then you can multiply it another. Okay, so it will be a million actually. Okay, million times million. So you have to be careful that dust particles which are in several microns can spoil, overwhelm your light scattering signals. So, of course, for dust particle, you can't apply a Rayleigh formula. You have to apply, I mean, some other Tyndall scattering or some other thing. And this will excite you that our great Indian scientist, Jagdish Chandra Bose, who is known for several inventions, and he was funded by, which is not in the public domain, but a lot of devotees of Swami Vivekananda, female devotees, they actually started his lab. Actually, they liberally funded Jagdish Chandra Bose's lab. Actually, I was reading a book on Swami Vivekananda, and written by an IAS officer, um, retired IAS officer. So anyway, so you can see that how things connect actually, right? This is what we have learned. This is another way of looking at the same thing which we have learned, that these are the airy discs which I was talking about, right? Now you can see the airy patterns actually. So you can see this is the center. If you look at from side, this is from the side, and this is the top view. So you can see that this is for each pixel, so you can see that this is central maximum, and then you have fringes, actually dark bright fringes. You might have seen those things in school actually, 11th, 12th, I'm not sure. So if by going by our definition, you can consider them as resolved, and they're just reaching the resolution limit, and these pixels are completely unresolved. So I think this settles the resolution uh, thing, and we'll come back to this 2-3 more times actually, at least two more times. We'll go much deeper, because this does not help us at all. This is just for bachas actually. Okay? It does not really. It's these things you are supposed to know much earlier. So yeah. So let us go to the next. If you have any question, please feel free to ask. Any question? समझ में आया कि नहीं आया? So we'll look at the basics of how electrons interact with matter, and this picture will make you familiar with so many techniques related to electron microscopy, including SEM, TEM, HRTM, yields, Auger, and your EDAX, backscattering, okay, HADAF, so many things you will learn from if you learn it how electrons talk to your sample. How so some flavor was given last time when I explained the difference between how X-ray photons talk to your sample and how electrons talk to your sample. Please remember that electrons are photons, and photons are, you can call them electromagnetic waves. So basically, X-rays interact with the electrons which are orbiting around the nucleus. Okay, so they set them in oscillation, and that's a pretty much. So they don't. X-rays do not interact with the nucleus. So X-rays are sensitive to the electron density. Okay? So more denser, the areas which are more denser, where electrons are more dense, from there, X-rays will get scattered more strongly. Please note that. So the areas where you have uh, higher electron densities, so that is the reason that when you analyze X-ray diffraction, single crystal or whatever, you actually get electron density maps. So based on that, you can look at the bonding actually, because bonding is pretty much the variation in the localization of electrons, right? I mean, what is bonding? In physics, there is nothing as such bonding. Bonding is the invention. The term itself is, physicists, they say that okay, there is a variation in the time which electrons spend on different uh, atoms. So you can call it deviation in the electron densities, either on this atom or that atom. You can call it as a glue or a bond or whatever you call it, right? So atom picture of atom is an illusion. Okay, it's an illusion. There is nothing, nothing as such. Nothing. There is nothing as an atom actually. Atom is just a specific area we have named where some neutrons, some protons, and some electrons, they are found together actually, right? You can call that as an atom, right? Okay, it's a very matter of convenience actually. Same is true actually if you can go a bit detailed, you can divide those particles also, like you can divide electrons and protons and neutrons. So you have basically those finer particles like quarks and other things, and you know. So and then quantum mechanically we say that everything is wave actually. It's made of wave with a lot of empty space. So all of you are nothing but collection of electron, proton, and neutron, right? And when you go to bed with this feeling, it's very existential crisis actually. We are not humans actually. We are just collection of some particles, actually, just waves, a lot of empty space. So so you understood that electrons look at Coulombian potential, okay, Coulombian interaction, because they are charged particles. Okay. So they look at the difference in the potential differences actually. They look at, suppose there is the potential is same everywhere, so electrons won't scatter. So these are the questions which we'll be understanding today. How do electrons talk to your sample? And then you can always compare with X-ray photons or UV photons or visible photons or IR photons or whatever terahertz or radio waves or whatever. If you have any question, you can ask me anytime. But that comparison will be very useful actually to you. You can also compare with the neutrons actually, that how the neutrons talk to atom. So please, you have to stretch your imagination in order to better understand uh, this subject. When and why does an electron get scattered? I answered this question that wherever there is a change in the, if suppose there is a Coulombian potential is, you know, basically you have the same electric field everywhere. So you want see the electrons scattered. So electrons get scattered when there is an inhomogeneity. Same thing with X-rays. X-rays get scattered when they see some variation, some inhomogeneity in the electron densities. If the electron densities are the same when X-rays are moving, so X-rays will not notice them. Okay. If everything is same, just imagine about your own self. Okay. Same thing is with any radiation actually. When we speak about refractive index and everything, so there has to be some inhomogeneity in the system, in the medium. Then only there is a scattering actually. So what do we learn from electron diffraction and scattering? So what is the difference between scattering and diffraction? How do we know? So when we discuss about scattering, scattering can be elastic scattering or inelastic scattering, right? So scattering is actually the particle phenomena, pretty much. We say we use scattering term mostly when we assume both the scatter and okay, so both of them as particles actually. So we don't look at the wave picture. Wave picture, when we use wave picture, we look at the diffraction. Second thing, second difference between scattering and diffraction is that scattering, in the scattering events, there can be energy exchange. But scattering can be inelastic or elastic. But in diffraction, we purely look at no energy exchange. In diffraction, you are very rigid. You look at elastic events. I mean, you can't have a diffraction pattern from inelastic events. You cannot have diffraction pattern. You cannot create, because the diffraction pattern to like you call it diffraction pattern, but basically if you have many such patterns, basically so for example, you have many atoms as a scatter placed in three-dimensional lattice. So basically what you are looking at is interference pattern. You look at the bright and dark fringes. I showed you that movie of magnification of TEM, and you at the end you saw those atomic lines. Those are not actually atoms. Now I will start teaching you a little bit more complexity. So actually electron macroscopy does not see atom, because there is nothing called as an atom. There is okay. So if some, I mean, in layman language, we say that, oh, we see the atoms. We'll use this term, but as a scientist, all of you should note that electron cannot see an atom. What electron see is basically Coulombian potential, the variation in the Coulombian potential actually. It looks at electron interaction and nucleus interaction. You can call it as an atom actually, but this is your imagination. It does not show you. It's not an atom actually. Okay, please note that. Same thing is with X-rays. X-rays do not see atom, but you say that okay, this atom is placed there, and you make models based on your X-ray diffraction pattern, right? You do all that. You look at the bond angle, you look at the bond distance, all kinds of things. But please note that you are doing all those imaginations, structural properties, imagination based on the electron density, how electron densities are distributed in three-dimensional space. Here it is a Coulombian potential. That's it. Full stop. Yeah. So it is, please note that X-rays look at the electron density, sorry, electron, yeah. So X-rays look at the electron density inhomogeneity, does not interact with the nucleus. We discussed last time also, I'm repeating it due to the onion structure of our course. And electrons look at the Coulombian potential from electrons as well as from nucleus. Please note the difference. This is Coulombian potential. This is electron density. Okay. And this is because of the nature of the particle. X-rays are photons, right? Massless particle, chargeless particles. They are just electromagnetic waves, right? And electrons have mass, they have charge. So this is useful to us. And uh, you can read this. There are many differences which are covered here, and many differences which are not covered here, but I'm telling you uh, right now. Another difference between scattering and diffraction is that scattering diffraction, uh, in order to diffraction to happen, you need the you need the waves to be coherent, strictly coherent, and we will see the consequences of that in TEM. In TEM, there is a technique HADAF, high angle annular dark field, which is used a lot at NCL by many enlightened students. Okay, and many people in catalysis and my division. And so HADAF is HADAF are actually the electrons which are scattered, which are at slightly larger angle than the Bragg angles. Okay, so they are they are not coherent. Actually, they lose their coherency. Coherency, I'll teach you. Don't worry about this thing. You might be wondering what is coherency. I teach it in a very nice way, so you will understand these concepts. Don't worry at all. I've been teaching this course more than a decade, so don't worry about if you're not able to uh, understand some basic concepts now. Will be You are not missing anything, because we'll be coming back to the same thing again and again. So now, what is the probability that electrons will that scattered elastically or the clears? More chances more chances it has that it will undergo the inelastic events, actually, right? And that is better for you for analytical chemistry information, because you want to know how many what is the atomic number of particular atom. How do you know about see, one thing you want to know, that stoichiometry or whatever, whether it is gold atom or it is copper atom. So one only way to, if you ask an atom, okay, who are you, okay, so atom will tell you, okay, you count my number of electrons, and then you look at the periodic table. If number of electrons are, for example, 30, so I am zinc, okay, zinc atom. And but how will you, I mean, just look at this, it is impractical. Just assume you are probing electron, you are coming running away, you are an electron, okay, which is coming from electron beam. And when you so you have to, how will you count the number of electrons? Basically, you can, in one scattering event, at the first you will talk to only one electron, because electrons are, suppose there are 40 electrons or 30 electrons or whatever it is, 48 electron or 79 electrons for gold. They're all orbiting in different kinds of orbitals, right? As P, D, they're all complex, energy states, right? Different energies. So it's not possible that electron, it's not like electron यहाँ भी जाएगा, फिर ये बात करके, फिर छू करके यहाँ जाएगा, ये फिर ये कोई वो थोड़ी है कॉलेज का पहला साल जहाँ पे इंट्रोडक्शन होता है, हाँ, नया बच्चा आता है हॉस्टल में, तो वो सबसे जाकर के पूछता है, अपना बताता है, मेरा नाम मनीषा जैन है, हाँ, ऐसे थोड़ी होगा कि ये इलेक्ट्रॉन आया है पूछेगा सबसे, एंड it won't go okay, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 ho gaya. It's not possible. It's just one event. And also the probability of electron actually interacting with another this electron is very low. We'll come to that later on. It is surprisingly low. It does not, it just most of the time it miss interact. There is no interaction actually most of the time. It just goes through it without interacting. Now, what is the easiest thing for this? Then, but I want to know, as a chemist, I want to know Z. What is the easiest way? Somebody will speak up. What is the easiest for us for the electron, which wants to investigate the atomic number? Can you please speak up? Somebody unmute.
Sir, can you please repeat the question? Actually, my internet connection is not stable, sir.
Mayur, the question is that I have one electron which is part of the which is part of the electron beam coming, and then I want to know the number of I mean atomic number Z. I want to investigate this, which is actually a number of total number of electrons which are orbiting. How will I investigate?
So basically, sir, I mean, I think
see, electron. Suppose this electron is in a spire. It's in a spire, incoming electron.
Yes, sir.
And it is coming towards the atom, right? And it is given a task that find out how many electrons are there.
There are various methods, sir. Like if suppose we want to know the unknown.
No, you are going in another direction. I'm not talking about many methods. I'm talking right here in front of you. You have to explain. How can I investigate what type of atom it is through the scattering of this electron? That's the question.
Hello, sir.
Yes, answer.
Sir, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Sir, by the backscattered electrons.
Excellent. Yes, yes. So you answered the final part, but so backscattering happens. Why does backscattering has the information about number of electrons? How does it get? I mean, not number of electrons, but Z. It's pretty much same. But so what answer is telling that it is not practical for this electron to go and talk to each electron, but electron can go and talk to nucleus. How many protons you have? Its the answer is the same, and that can happen in one single event, right? Answer. That's the question. That's the answer actually, right? So
okay, sir.
Yeah. So answer is so because this is a tiny space. यहाँ पे अगर इलेक्ट्रॉन इसके पास जाकर के इससे पूछ लेगा कि भाई आपके पास कितने प्रोटॉन है, so now you have Z. How will it know that how many? Because it will get deflected as she mentioned correctly, that backscattering actually. So electron, when it will come closer to the nucleus, very close to the nucleus, so electron interaction about the atomic number. It does not tell you the type of atom, right? Isn't it clear? Electron interaction cannot tell you about the chemistry of the system. It does not tell you the information about how many atoms you can get of particular element actually. Okay, whatever. So when electron goes very close to this, so it will make a U-turn. Okay, because of the slingshot. I will explain it. Why does it? So this electron is negatively charged and this nucleus is positively charged. So it will get pulled and then it's like a slingshot. So it will get deflected in the same direction, almost the same direction. So you can call it a backscattered electron. And depending upon so suppose it has more charge, so it will be it will have more scattering probability, right? So based on that, you can easily calculate. You can whether it is the gold atom or it is vanadium atom or it is titanium atom. That is one technique. So electron nucleus interaction, elastic interaction is one of the way of knowing type of electron. So any electron nucleus interaction, and Hardolf also is there. that is also one of the very nice way part of where we know the Z contrast. Okay. Another way is that basically you knock out. What is the second way? Inelastic scattering event. What is another way to know what kind of atoms we are probing? Anybody else? Another technique? That so this electron can knock out this core electron, right? Because core electron energy is very typical to that atom, right? It is not changed by type of bonding. Of course, binding energy, electron binding, electron escape energy, which when you look at the when you calculate, that get affected by so many things about the valence state. I mean, from the valence states and other things. But so this core electron energy is you can you know core electron energy and you can back calculate it from the binding energy and and then you can calculate the I mean indirectly. We'll discuss all these. So this becomes actually a technique. It's everything become technique. So you can learn so much from electron matter interaction. You can learn so much actually. Everything becomes a technique actually here. There are more questions actually. What is the probability that an electron will be scattered when it passes near an atom? We'll calculate that. For example, when you throw a tennis ball on your hostel glass window, if there is any, don't try this experiment. Otherwise, wardens will not be very happy. So you throw the ball 10 times on a glass window, and 9 times the ball comes back to you, and one time the ball basically break the glass and goes to the another side, and then you know there is a complaint about you to the warden. So out of 10, 9 events were inelastic scattering events, and 1 event was inelastic event, right? Inelastic event, because there was energy transfer. Energy transfer happened, and it was so much that that energy broke the glass. So we'll see that what is the probability of elastic events and inelastic event, and based on that we decide our technique when we go to the TM room, which technique we can use. Second question is that if the electron is scattered, what is the angle through which it is deviated? I have answered this question partially, and we'll discuss more about various possibilities. What is the average distance an electron travel between the scattering events? And this is a very important question because it gives you contrast. And this question decides the thickness of your sample. I mean, it decides what thickness you can take okay, when you do the experiment. Does the scattering event causes electrons to lose the energy or not? We'll see. So some of the questions are answered in this slide. So many times I ask questions in the final exam from the same slide, because it's one of the most important and often discussed slide actually. So you can see pretty much all interactions which can happen where electron beam, high energy electron beam talks to your sample. So this is your sample, this one. So this is high energy electron beam, 200 kilo electron volt or 300 kilo electron volt. So so when the beam hits your specimen, so there is one possibility that the beam will go unscattered, uninteracted. I told you that there is a high possibility that beam will just go through. It will not talk to any electron or any of the nucleus. So you can call it a direct beam, but later on we will modify. It is actually not direct beam. It is zero diffracted beam, but and in a layman language we can say that it is a direct beam. So this is elastic interaction, and this beam is used to form your bright field image, normal TM image, which you use to get the topography information only, but this will not have any information about crystallarity. So you cannot, if you keep on magnifying on this beam, you will never get uh, those fringes which I showed you. Okay, you will never get, because that information does not exist here. There is another beam which will come somewhere here. It basically consists of the electron uh, which are Bragg diffracted. Suppose there are lattice fringes here in the sample. These are lattice fringes. So depending upon the Bragg angle theta, suppose that a Bragg condition is satisfied. So at certain angle theta, you will see those Bragg Bragg diffracted electrons. So if you, and those are elastically scattered electrons, those are coherent electrons, extremely coherent electrons. And if you collect those electrons and form image, so that will form your dark field image, dark field. So that image will give you information about crystallarity. Actually, you will, if only you look at those images alone, so you will get information whether that particle is crystalline or amorphous. Suppose you have so many particles in your system, you did some synthesis, and you go to the XRD room and you collect the powder X-ray diffraction, and you find that you suspect that my synthesis is not good. Maybe some of the particles are amorphous, some of the particles might be crystalline. So how, if you want to see this information, that out of let's say 100 particles which you see in TEM on the grid in a specific area which you have selected, out of 100 those are selected particles, out of that what is the proportion of particles which are crystalline, and what is the proportion that might be amorphous. So this is a clever way of knowing which so those particles will only light up, will show up, which are crystalline. Of course, it depends upon, also it gives you much deeper information that you can select a particular lattice plane. Okay, we'll discuss about that more in detail when we go to the second round of. Okay, so there is another beam which is coming here, elastically scattered electrons, but these are not coherent; these are incoherent. So this is these electrons are they are not Bragg diffracted, so they are not coherent. So they do not have the crystallinity contrast. So they are used for Z contrast. Actually, they are used to image. They are very useful. I told you adapted. Okay. Inelastically scattered electrons, they are used in yields. We'll discuss in the next lecture. Electron energy loss spectroscopy is extremely useful for physicists, chemical engineers, chemists, material scientists. Bremsstrahlung X-rays are not very useful for us. I mean, those are the X-rays, okay? And characteristic X-rays are basically, you all know, they form EDS, right? Energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy. So those are again inelastic signals. Visible light, you can see electron hole pair. You can look at the transitions, exciton formation, right? Auger electrons, you see backscattered already. One of the student discussed. So I will end it here because I can see that already students are do not have much patience. And okay, so any question if you have, please feel free to ask.